Hello, it's Carly McAvoy. I want to talk about why we can't find the square root of a negative number. Just to remind you of some symbols that we're going to be talking about, the index of a radical here is r. If we're talking about square root, then that r is 2 and we don't show it, we just assume it. This is the radical symbol, and then the radicand is the number or expression that's under your radical symbol. We can simplify radical expressions when the negative is outside the radical symbol, because when you have a negative out front, it's just like saying -1 times that radical. So you can just do that. It's two separate things, and I end up with negative, and the square root of 25 is 5, so -5. I could do it with a negative outside a radical with a fraction. We would just separate those two fractional parts. There's one negative here, so that would be just hanging around out front. The square root of 25 is 5, the square root of 49 is 7, and our negative would be out front. Or if we had two negatives in a fractional expression, the square root of 1 is 1, and we have that negative out front. The square root of 225 is 15 with a negative out front, and then two negatives make a positive. You could have canceled those negatives up there, but we can work with negatives with expressions that are radical. But we can't put the negative under the radical symbol. Once we do that, and when our index is even, and if we're working with a square root of 2, 2 is an even number, then there's no real number solution. And why is that? Because the square root of 100 really secretly has a little 2 up there for an index. We don't see it, we assume it though, and that's an even number. And that means what the question is asking when you see that is what number times itself equals 100? And 10 times itself equals 100, or -10 times itself equals 100. But whether you have a positive or a negative times itself, you get a positive answer. So there's no real number times itself that equals a negative number. So we're saying what number times itself would give me a positive answer? A negative answer. We can't get that because it's always positive. So we say square root of negative 100, does not exist, or we just write D and E. That's why we're limited to real numbers. So as you go further in math, you can see how to solve those. Well, what if the index is an odd number? Remember, our index is this number out front of the radical symbol. And if that's something like 3, then the cubic root of 27 is 3, because 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. You need 3 of those because you have a root that your index is 3. And down here, if you say the cubic root of -27, that would be -3, because -3 times -3 times -3 is -27. So an odd number works because if we multiply something times itself an odd number of times, then we would get a negative answer if the number was negative, so that's perfectly fine. Anytime the index is even if it's greater than 2, it's not going to work out, because if we have the cubic root of 16, that's equal to 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16. 4 2's, because we have a root here of index of 4. But there's no real number times itself 4 times that equals a negative number. So the fourth root of -16 does not exist until we learn about imaginary numbers. All right, have a fantastic day.